All right, so I'll call this meeting of the BBC to order at 1:03 p.m. It is Wednesday, February 11th. Hybrid from the FinCom room, because it's school committee room. And in attendance, we have Mr. Bob Donnelly from the Board of Selectmen. We have Ms. Maya Bodenhofer. Eric Fleming from the FinCom, and myself and Teresa Stewart are remote from the school committee. And then obviously, and also we have Superintendent Luff is remote as well. So there will be, if we do any votes tonight, there will be a roll. Today, there'll be a roll. So I did have an agenda sent out. Melanie sent out the agenda for us. Just a couple of things to discuss. First of all, we did have meeting minutes that were sent out. So I think we should vote to approve those minutes. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments about the minutes that were in the packet?
No, I'll move to approve the minutes. Second.
Moved by Bob and then seconded by Eric. Thank you. All right, any other questions? I'll need to roll vote it. So I'll start with my little team on the left. Eric?
Yes.
Maya?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Teresa?
Abstain because I wasn't there.
And I'm a yes. So that's 4 yes, 1 abstention, and yeah, then that passes 4-0-1. Perfect. So next item on the agenda was discussion of the Chapter 70. That was not Chapter 70, sorry. The governor's budget, including Chapter 70, because that is part of the discussion. So the governor's budget did come out. It obviously hasn't proceeded past that, but just a general discussion. Not sure if anybody has anything specific they want to bring up about the governor's budget, except that Chapter 70 definitely didn't go up as much as we thought it was going to, or that it has been going up.
Yeah, I'll let Sean talk about it a little bit. There's in the funding formula, there's a hold harmless for districts who have lower enrollment. And Sean, what percentage of districts were held harmless this year because of the decrease in enrollment,
85%.
Yeah, so there's definitely an issue with the funding formula in general. I know there's some advocacy to change that formula, but this is the one that we're in. So we have substantially less than we had last year as far as increases go. Last year we were on 1 million and change. I think we are at 250 something, Sean.
The total or the increase? The increase is like 250, yeah, 256, something like that. Which
The
is,
good news is, even though we had a decrease in enrollment, it's still an increase. Bad news is the funding formula is harming 80% of districts this year, but at least the whole harmless.
Do you want it, so what I put together just an agenda, but it has cherry sheet on there. Do you want to jump to that now? I just put the old, from the town side, what I thought we were going to talk about. But if you want to go to the next page at cherry sheet revenue. And for those I'll send out the copy to everybody, just finalizing this while we came down here. So here's exactly what Sean said. We're up 265,500, 1.43%. The sheet has a lot of columns on it. I just want to explain. So the left side, the fiscal 2026 Norwood budget, we used the governor's proposal last year. The next column is what DOR is starting with for this year, the 26. So you can see again, we have that inconsistency with the charter tuition reimbursement. You'll see that on the other side too. So we're not really sure what those numbers are going to be. I know Sean and Tim, you guys have gone through and figured out the right numbers, so we should be charged the correct number. I don't believe it's that 744. So throughout the year that will come down, and I believe that's when the governor's aide came back with the 269 in the 27 proposal. So again, there's something crazy between the charter tuitions that we are aware of, we are looking into. We believe we have it right, so the 27 proposal should be the good starting point.
Okay.
And again, I just showed the change of what the governor is putting out versus what we have to budget because we used different numbers last year.
Right.
So just so everybody's clear, it's budget to budget. So again, 1.43% increase in Chapter 70, 1.39, even though the governor's telling us it's 2.5% based on what we used as the budget. The next page is just the assessments. Same methodology. Not much has changed here, but again, you can see if we just use the governor's proposal, we're up 2.26% on our assessments, which would be bad. But because of our budget, we use the initial governor's proposal, our assessments aren't as drastic of an increase as we could have seen or would see with the two budgets, comparing the final DOR to the governor's proposal.
Okay.
So there's a discrepancy in both the revenue and the spending side on the charter school thing.
Correct, correct.
So if we look at like the cherry sheet receipts minus the assessments, like the receipts are up like total 327,000 from what we budgeted last year. And the assessments are up 71,000 from what we.
Correct.
So it's about
250,000,
250,000 higher than last year, which is a very
Yes.
small amount.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Positive, which is good, but
Yeah,
it's.
positive, but nowhere near where we'd like to see it or we
Right,
should see it technically.
right. I really like this format. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is really helpful to go back and look at the budget, not just the governor's number.
Correct.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Not to sound negative, but that 250 grand is probably 60% of that is going to get, is the equivalent of the elevator repair we need in this building. So just to put it in perspective, for anyone who thinks $250,000 is, you're right, it's nice that it's positive, but it's like, all right.
And again, I said at the Finance Commission meeting, again, if you look at last year, we did go down from the governor's budget, so I don't think, that 250 might be aggressive even.
Right.
We'll see.
I think as everyone remembers, we've historically gone with just the governor's number, and as we get closer to town meeting, we adjust with free cash if needed, if it's up or down, but rather than playing the game of, okay, we've got another $9,000 when the house comes out, how do we want to make an adjustment? It's just, we run with the governor's number and go from there.
Okay.
Back to pages, 2 seconds. I don't want to hijack the meeting, but if you just we'll go through the comparative budget review. This is just updated. Again, you can see that the general government, we finalized our budget proposal, which was initially presented to the Board of Selectmen last night, so that number changed slightly. Health insurance, as many of you are aware, GIC came out with their initial projection of a 10.9% increase, so well above what we were expecting. They are, as I mentioned last time, they are working on a number of changes to their formulas, changes to copays, changes to deductibles. So they are voting tomorrow. The increase is expected to be anywhere from 6% to 13% actual, depending on what they vote on. And as Tony mentioned, even if they come out with 6% tomorrow, we have to look at our plans and our subscribers to see what that actual impact is to us. So,
Right.
there's going to be a big delta. Hopefully there'll be a big delta and that number will come down. But it's just kind of a wait and see right now.
Which I will say, I think it's significant enough that we can't make any decisions today, because again, you could be talking about $1 million swing to the positive, and that's possible if the state actually does something, but it's just significant enough that we're talking major changes.
Yeah.
Again, so the cherry sheet assessments, that number's been updated. So again, based on the GIC cherry sheet and the general government budget, we are now projected at a $7.7 million deficit / use of free cash. We did just put that line on the bottom, just to remember, when we started to talk about this in October, we were looking at a $10 to $12 million deficit. So new growth has obviously helped. Some of the other numbers, some of the budget, I won't say reductions, but some of the budget increases we did not include in there have reduced that ask at this time.
Yes.
And again, very preliminary, not what we're finalized, so still work to be done here.
And last fiscal '26 budget, we used at town meeting 7.45 million
45,
for
correct.
comparison, so
Correct.
slightly above that. We didn't use all of that in the end, but that's what we budgeted.
Well, it's this year, so we don't know if we'll use all that in the end.
Oh, right,
So, yeah,
I'm sorry.
25 we didn't, yeah, so
Right.
because revenues came in higher, expenses came in lower in 25, we didn't need to use
Right.
as much of the reserve that we thought, the 2.1 million, I believe it's 2.1 off the top of my head, we did not need to use that. Just the only other slide before we get into discussion, just the sixth one, the projected revenue outlook. The only thing that's changed here is the charity sheet. So nothing's changed since the last time we met and presented the numbers to you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Jeff. Yeah, you're right. This is what we're going to look at, and I apologize. I was out last week on a state business trip and didn't get to reach out to everybody to make sure that I had what they needed on the agenda before I needed to get Melanie to post it ASAP. So appreciate you putting it together. All right, any other discussion on this? Anything? It looks, I mean, it's obviously good news that we're down from where we were projecting in the first place. Not good news that we're not getting certain amounts from the state, but not good news that we don't have health insurance yet. So that kind of pretty much lumped together two of the agenda items with the governor's budget, chapter 70, and the shared costs. Were we still waiting on other shared costs? What else were we waiting on? I'm blanking.
Just
I think all proposals are in. It's really just health insurance that we're waiting on. And again, we're just, that delta point being as much as it is a couple $100,000 is just, we gotta wait for that one. I mean, to your point, we're in a good position. Last year we used, $7.5 million. We might be around there. Obviously, if health insurance is really bad, then that could be 8.5 or 9 million. If that number comes in good, it could be we're using $6.7 million free cash. And conceptually, not only are we better than where we projected by a significant amount, we're technically better than we were last year. That's a good place to be in. It's just that health insurance number is a little, it's always scary. And if I could take a moment to point out, because the question always comes up, why we can't live under the guidelines of Prop 2.5. Health insurance is the best example, and I think in discussing with town meeting this year, we need to make sure that that's clear. The 10% increase on health insurance is what is killing our budget. That's what's destroying our ability to live under Prop 2.5. That budget is larger than the police and fire budgets. I think, it's probably larger than like the budget for the high school. So when you take a minute and think about that, we spend more on health insurance than we do on high school, even if you included the debt service for the high school. So it's such an insane number that makes such a huge impact on the budget. That 1% swing is critical, and we have very little control over it. We have a larger discussion we did with the board last night about health insurance and where we are, but it's so significant that the rest of the budget pales in comparison. Could you imagine a 10% increase in other lines would create all sorts of an issue, and then here's health insurance, we get nothing more for that 10% increase. It's a killer.
Well, hopefully, the projection you have here, 10.79, is a high projection. I think I'm glad you did it. It's a wild card, but the 10.79, what were the benchmarks you were using to? Is this information that you get preliminarily from the GIC hearings?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, that came out with their cost if they make no changes to plan design. But again, remember, there's always another point or two swing in there, how that actually impacts our plans, because they'll come out with the general increase is 10.9%, but certain plans might be 14 and certain plans might be 6. So we're within never really to the benefit, to be honest with you, but we're within usually a point or two of that. If they adopt all the plan design changes, their across the board increase is looking to be about 6%. I would be hopeful they would look at adopting all of them. My guess is maybe they come somewhere in the middle and we're able to shave that number down. That health insurance increase the last 5 years has eaten up close to between a third and half of the cost of living adjustments we've given to employees. So if you take the COLAs we've done the last couple of years, town or school, doesn't matter where, sometimes a third to a half of that is eaten up just by health insurance alone. Forget about regular inflation in the economy.
So that's the GIC is going to come out with a pretty much on average all their plans, but then we have to assess employee plan selection to define. In the past, have we been able, when we've seen those, when we've gone through our analysis of how it really hits us, have we seen that we're either above the GIC target or below?
We've been both. The last couple of years, it hasn't been particularly helpful. There were some years, what usually happens is people start switching plans, and then everyone says, we're all going to Plan C because it's nice, low-cost plan, then we all jump into Plan C and we have a nice year for health insurance, nice being like 3 or 4%, and then the next year, which plan gets whacked with the 11% increase when everyone else goes up by 7%? The one everyone just switched to. So it's benefited us sometimes, it's hurt us sometimes. A lot of the lower cost plans have sort of come up, they've eliminated some plan options, so we're probably closer to that. But again, if I think whatever is WellPoint is our most subscribed plan, if that one goes up 13 instead of 11, it's like, that's 65-70% of our people going up that amount.
So no trend can be really discerned from
And the
this.
GIC, man, you were there when, kind of they talked about, Maya has the same thing.
Yes.
It's a single and then it's a family. They don't have a single plus a spouse or single plus partner, so it's a big jump when somebody makes the move, and we did see that last year. A few folks made that move from the single to the multiple plan.
Right.
And that's a big cost.
Oh, single,
Plans that have single plus 1 plus 2 don't necessarily help. I've got that now where I am, and they're just as expensive, they're ridiculous.
Yeah, a lot of health insurers eliminated them over time because what it usually ends up being is an older couple who use more health insurance. Having a baby is expensive, but young kids are actually not expensive from a health insurance standpoint. It's a lot of cheaper and more preventative care. So a lot of places have eliminated the adult plus 1 plans. And just if I could briefly on the GIC, by being a member of the GIC, which I think as everyone knows is the state's insured, does 40,000 state employees plus a couple of dozen cities and towns in Massachusetts. The benefit is a very large pool. The downside, we have no control over plan design changes, so we couldn't go to our employees and say, can you pay $10 more for a copay and that'll reduce the amount this month. We lose control, but we're part of a very large pool. Given our loss ratio, apologies to Bob and Mike who heard this from me last night, our loss ratio is always terrible. It's in our benefit at this point that we're in a much larger pool where other people are paying for our relatively high losses. There's things we're trying to work on to see if we can mitigate that over time, but nothing that would provide any budgetary relief for the next year or two.
And I have fact-checked Tony on that. Again, I couldn't
didn't
believe
believe
that we had a $20+ million claim, but we did have a review, and yes, that's true. We are certainly being subsidized.
Yeah, and I asked this question last year, and I think that when we go to town meeting, that's definitely something that should be brought up, because it will be brought up again, just like I did, okay, where's the analysis, where's the in-depth analysis that we should be staying with GIC, and that all of our employees on a single, health insurance plan somewhere, commercial health insurance plan wouldn't help. I just think you're definitely gonna need that type of analysis to convince people that staying with GIC is and everyone who has health insurance knows this is more systemic. But I think when you get to town meeting and people really are looking critically at the budget, that's something that might come up again.
Yeah, I would agree. With the loss ratio being where it is, that's the easiest number that, if our total all spend is $26 million and the loss ratio is 28 or 29, no insurer would provide the same product without having a number 10 or 15% above that to cover their losses. And then you have to look at trying to bargain to get a cheaper plan, but we're a bad health insurance client. We're a great property and casualty client. We are a terrible health insurance customer.
Is the town still looking into like an opt-out?
Yeah, we're hopeful we can try to get that up and running for this year. The risk is, the PEC agreed to it and everything. The risk is we need to hit a certain target to actually either break even or save money. Even if we break even, there's a benefit there because on the one hand, we're reducing claims, and you could argue we're reducing healthy people and still keeping the high claims. It doesn't matter other than if nothing else, nothing changes with that. But then we could take $2 million of premium and then you're paying employees $2 million. I'd much rather give the money to employees than give the money to the GIC. The PEC was flexible with us in that we can decide whether we hit that target or not, but it's a tough challenge to sort of go down that path and then, okay, we don't think we hit it, and people have already made some health insurance changes and then they want to run back, and then open enrollment the GIC is unnecessarily strict with. So we're thinking yes. It's just there's that nervous factor of the year you do it. We got to make sure we don't inadvertently spend $500,000 more than we want to. And it's also tough to do it on a year when we're looking at an 11% increase. If we had a year with a 3% increase, we'd say, okay, this is the year to take the risk and do it. But
All right. Looks like we have one more thing to consider here.
Yeah, I put this, well, there's 2 others after this that we can talk about, but this, talk with Sean during the weekly meetings, think we both decided that this probably should come up at this committee to decide how to fund those 3 positions. Sean, you got it?
We have 3 positions that we funded using the Medicaid federal funds. We've been doing a lot on the school side, and superintendent can add to this, about claiming for more cost areas. So we've increased the revenue already last year by about 170,000. And we're just trying to find the best, so we asked for a warrant last year to sort of give us a 1-year lead on those 3 positions. The 3 positions are not in our regular budget, they're being paid by the warrant article. And then the goal is to find some method or methodology for using this increase in the federal Medicaid, UMass Medicaid funds to pay for these 3 positions going forward.
So what would be potential options?
Go ahead.
So I think that the cleanest, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, but the schools include those in the budget. We have the Medicaid line go from 350 to 650 in the revenue, so it's a pure offset. So their budget will go up 3.2%, but those employees are included in there. It's fully transparent, that is the full school budget. I think a warrant article kind of takes a little transparency out of there, does go against the financial policies of using free cash for operating budget items. So that's the cleanest method. The other option is, and Sean and I talked, you can set up a revolving fund for these, but again, that's a lot of work, it's a lot of explanation. Again, you're gonna have to go through the whole town meeting explanation of why are we setting this up? What happens if there's a revenue shortfall? How does that get funded? So I think we have 3 options.
Yeah.
The warrant is probably the least desirable, in my opinion.
Some towns just do an annual warrant, so we could continue to do warrants every year for that, to request those funds into a separate account.
But it's very similar to, in the general fund budget, we have the ambulance, we collect the fees, so the treasurer's, you're gonna see there, the treasurer's expense line is going up significantly to cover those.
Right.
But revenue is offset, the revenue increase is offsetting those. So it's more of an explanation, again, just, it makes the most sense, but certainly open to whatever the committee would like.
Well, it was presented to town meeting as a one-time, let's get this started, see how it goes. It sounds like the result of that is it went well, okay, now but we shouldn't just keep doing that. We should say now, like you said, incorporate it in the budget. There's more revenue, the expenses go up, but the revenue goes up accordingly, and it balances out.
My preference had always been the revolving account, just in terms of, we know what we're getting in, and then we know what we can fund right from that revolving account each year, and we can monitor and change the budget around or change those employees around as we need to. I know that's how I did in the past, and there was questions right from DOR on that, just so I totally get that. If we were to put it in the operating budget, I really want to make it clear that we're not increasing, right? We're not increasing the budget necessarily this year. We have these staff. Not to say that I'm somewhat proud of the 2.96%. I want to keep it under 3, and that's just me saying that. And we still would, but we just have to make it really clear if we're going to go that way. And I'm open either way. I just want to make sure that we always know that we're looking at the revenue of X for the positions of X, right? So it's a direct correlation.
And the revolving fund would accomplish that, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it would also take
And it
350 out of
is
the
done that way in
revenue.
other towns.
Right.
But then it takes expense out of the expense out too.
The expense is already out. So now you're taking $350,000 out of our revenue budget.
But you were going to increase the revenue.
But I'm saying it's the revolving fund. If you do the revolving fund, we basically have to take the 350, we should take that 350 Medicaid to fund the revolving fund.
Or
Because in the event there's a
300, right.
shortfall, you really can't, the school is not gonna put money into the revolving fund.
Yeah, that would be one of my concerns with the revolving fund. You're technically not supposed to appropriate into them. So what if we're in a couple of years where something changes and we're short $32,000, then we're going to town meeting and they say, oh my God, you're short $32,000. You've crashed your revolving fund. I mean, Tim did a great job with his budget this year. It's hard to lose that sub 3% number and feel like it's going up more. We don't blame Tim for that. If we're going to do this permanently, I would say throw it in the budget, throw the revenue in. Everyone can explain at town meeting if they say, oh my God, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to complain about a 3.2% budget increase, but the revenues are going up. We tried it last year. It's now permanent. And that gives us the flexibility down the road if the revenues wane a little bit, or if the expenses wane a little bit, that we're not either sitting on extra money or running into an issue where it's, oh, the revenues went down a little bit, we couldn't bill for something, and now we're short money at the end of the year. It's just revenue in, expense in, we're done.
Teresa?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple thoughts. First, it's important to me to say that the school committee works very, very hard to always be transparent in everything that we do. And we always have Sean and Tim show us on slides these two positions, or three positions, excuse me, the one BCBA and two OTs. And they tell us in every quarterly report, this is coming from the Medicaid funding and the free cash that was agreed at the last town meeting. We also very transparently always say what positions are being supported out of title money or grant money. So transparency with the school committee is not an issue. And I think we can always guarantee that no matter how we move forward, you're always gonna get that from us. I think this is now the 5th or 6th year we've been talking about how to use this Medicare money. And the school committee has pretty consistently been advocating for the revolving fund. 2 years ago, I thought we were almost there. And then there was a lot of transition, both with schools and towns, and we paused it. And then last year, we agreed to do it the way we did. Could somebody just remind me, because I'm not remembering all the details, what did town meeting approve last year? It was just the one-time 300,000 could be used. We didn't set it up that it could be an ongoing put into a fund.
And that was a use of $300,000 of free cash to fund these positions for 1 year.
For 1 year.
With the
And-
intent that you're going to increase the revenue as a
Yes.
result.
Yeah, it was to be like a 1 year, like,
Trial.
get off the ground, so that as the revenue increases, eventually there'd be like
Right.
a revolving or some mechanism to sustain it.
The expectation was that the positions would become self-financing.
Right.
So, Anne Marie, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like representing the school committee, we were understanding that that was a stepping stone to the revolving fund. Am I not remembering correctly?
No, I think that's what we talked about and what we were trying to convey to the town and to town meeting was that, yeah, it was a one-time funding to fund these positions in order to show that we could increase the revenue and that it would be a self-sustaining system, basically, that we could fund these positions fully out of Medicaid funds and the increases so that we would basically be covering almost like a grant, these positions, and they would be basically self-funding, because that is the idea of a revolving fund, is that you're constantly, the funds coming in are paying for the service that they're giving, and it would constantly revolve like that. So that was definitely my understanding of it.
And if I could ask one more clarifying question, this is probably for Tim and Sean. But these positions also, we went through the process of taking out of one of the grants, correct? And we intentionally took them out of one of the grants so that, can you remind me the benefit of why we did that?
Yeah, we actually took all of the positions that could receive mass health money out of the grant because you can't double dip. So whenever you're claiming for Medicaid, you actually have to put $1 in for every $2 you get back, for example. So you can't use IDEA, for example, federal money, if they're funded in a federal grant, you can't use federal money to get federal money back. So the seed money has to be outside of federal grant money, so we pulled these folks out, put them in the operating, so then we could fund the seed money for mass health in a legal way.
And Anne Marie, if I could just say one more thing that's been a topic in the school committee for a few years. Although I completely understand right now the reimbursement for Medicare, Medicaid goes to different cash, there is advocacy from the school committee and school committees across the state that mechanism changes and that the money goes directly back to the school district, not to the free cash of the municipality. So we haven't yet talked about our legislative advocacy for the next year, but I imagine, because we've been doing this for years now, that is still something the school committee is interested in. And I just want to point out that caveat, because although I understand it goes into free cash right now, that's a mechanism we have no control over, but in my perspective, it's a little different than using just free cash, generally speaking.
Yeah, just to clarify, it doesn't go into free cash, it goes into general fund revenue. So it could be considered a part of free cash, but if our revenues equal budgeted, we don't generate any free cash.
Right, but in practice, every single year that I've been here, because it comes in at the end of the year, it goes to free cash because we're already done paying at that point. If it comes in right at the end of the fiscal year, so it's almost.
That's not-
guaranteed it goes
That's
to
not
cash.
It, I don't think
No.
that's quite
It
right.
comes in quarterly throughout the year with one big payment probably in July though, June,
But-
July.
There have definitely been years that our Medicaid reimbursement was less than what we budgeted in our revenues. And so there were times that, like, it was actually kind of a hit against free cash because it wasn't as large as we thought. So I do understand that the revolving fund has some challenges with it. But I do, one of the things I like about the revolving fund is there's a very clear incentive for everyone to try to maximize those Medicaid revenues because it's very direct right back to the schools. And that was one of the things that the FinCom had talked about, I believe, at one point, because it had become apparent to us that at one point those Medicaid reimbursements were not getting much priority. We were essentially leaving money on the table. This is not about anybody in this room, right? But this is just like history long term. There were times that we were leaving money on the table. And so one of the things I like about a revolving fund is that it's providing the incentives that we want, which I like. I think it's definitely true that we can't appropriate money to a revolving fund, but if at some point the revolving fund isn't enough to fund these positions, there could be a change in the school. But the schools wouldn't have to put money into the revolving fund to pay these. What they would do is, I think they would make like, okay, maybe the BCBA is 0.8 out of the revolving fund, and then you put a 0.2 BCBA in the budget, and so it just has to get absorbed into the school budget. But I also am open to conversation. I think that we had talked at one point about like, well, our overall town budget assumes $350,000 in Medicaid reimbursement. And I think we talked about if it's over that, then that money would go into the revolving fund, right? Because if there was $511,000 last year, you don't need $511,000 to pay for these 3 positions, do you?
No, we had, when in our discussions, we had said like if there was a baseline of let's say 300 or 350, we were gonna increase it by 300 from there up to like 600 a goal, you know? So it's the amount over what the town has historically gotten that we've sort of increased it by.
So it wouldn't have to take it out of the town budget.
This is where we need some further clarification.
Okay,
I was
this is
gonna
what
ask
I'm
Sean. So I believe all Medicaid, I don't think you can split it between the two. I think it has to be one or the other, and I don't know off the top of my head, and Sean, you may know better than I do. But I also know that there's increased reporting, so your employees have to be fully dedicated to these you can't just do, like if the OT is 70% Medicaid and 30% in the schools, that's not eligible for the revolving fund, is my understanding. Basically, everything they do has to be specific, and Tim, you may know, just what I was reading when we were looking to potentially set this up. I think there's a lot more reporting, and again, I think it falls on you, and I don't know if DOR will get involved in it or DESI, but I do believe there's a little bit more administrative action that has to be done too.
Typically, if you split a position like that, there's time and effort reporting. So you know, we have to do that for all of our grants if we have split positions. So for example, they have to identify, you know, on a quarterly basis, whether they work 20% out of Title I and 80% out of, you know, the operating. The time and effort pieces would be there. These are fully Mass Health positions. That's why these ones are in there, because everything they do is Medicaid billing eligible. So that in this particular case wouldn't be an issue. It's really the work that they're doing, and they would have time reporting if we broke the funds up by 0.8, you know, 0.2, for example. But that is not something that's abnormal. We do that in some other cases with title grants, for example, already.
And just to clarify too, Maya, to your point about the, you know, over the 350, I think that was something we were talking about initially. Maybe I'm misremembering, but my understanding of it was, you know, obviously at some point to bring it all back in because it's all being generated by, for the most part, by the schools. These are, and the reason that any of this has, and you're right, we did have years where it was under 350 because the reporting, you know, we weren't being very careful about it. And then once, you know, certain business managers came in and said, this is ridiculous, we really need to be much more diligent about this and started paying attention, then all of a sudden the revenue started going up.
Yeah.
And making sure we're getting, not even revenue, reimbursed. You know, really it's a reimbursement. The services are being rendered. And they're being rendered by staff on the school side. So this is just being able to get reimbursed for those things. So it would be, in my opinion, best for the town and the school sides if it was getting reimbursed, all of it, back to where it was coming out of, and that's just one less thing the town has to fund. I know it's semantics, right? It's where it's coming from. It's all going back in, it's all coming back out. Like, it just, I think to your point about having it, give an incentive, is huge. Like, cause that, once that revolving fund gets going and you know what it's funding and you know what's coming out of it, the incentive just increases from there to make sure that you're billing for every possible billable hour to Medicaid to get that money back in.
And I would say to that, if we were to put it all in, for example, Anne Marie, to that point, Jeff would have to take the revenue side down on his end, but we would then put some other positions that are eligible into that. Right?
That's what I meant, yeah.
You can kind of break it even that way.
Can I ask, would you be
It's really 6 of one, half dozen the other, but at the same time, like, I personally feel like the best mechanism is the revolving fund, just to make sure that there's an accountability on our side, that we're actually billing as much as we possibly can, because we have the impetus to try to get those positions paid for and out of the budget.
So the revolving funds are supposed to account, when you have full-time staff to them, for all of the benefits. There's 3 positions costed to it, or 4? And so you have like a health insurance swing that could be $0 or $80,000. And I just worry if the greater flexibility you have is in just adding it to the budget, adding the revenue, and then, if there's a workers' comp issue, it's a workers' comp issue, it comes out of workers' comp. If there's an unemployment issue, it comes out of unemployment. Otherwise, if you have an unemployment claim, you're technically supposed to be paying the revolving fund out of the revolving fund. They never have enough money for stuff like that. So then we're just kind of whacking the general fund anyway. The benefit cost, the pension cost, there might be teaching positions, so there might be nothing there. Medicare, the concern is if we're really charging everything to the revolving fund because we think that's best, there's a lot of crap we're supposed to charge to the revolving fund that I think just gets absorbed somewhere else. And as long as you have it in your budget, if it's $300,000, whatever it is, you've got kind of your total flexibility with that. Whereas the revolving fund, it's, you're gonna have that benefit swing among other things. And the challenge with the revolving fund is you can't really build too much money. You can't be like, great, there's $1 million in there. I guess you could start spending on other stuff. So
at one point we had talked about, with respect to grants, not with respect to revolving fund, but it seems analogous, that grants pay the grant funded positions, the benefits are paid out of the grant. We had
to the extent practical, that's not the whole variety of all grants. That's not always the case, but we go for what we can reasonably go for.
But I think we had talked at one point about, instead of putting actual cost for a specific employee, we were going to calculate some general overhead rate benefit cost.
Yeah.
And charge that, so that if the person who's in there suddenly switches to a family plan, it doesn't whack the grant. You can be but that the grant is paying, if the person's on a single plan or not taking health insurance, then the grant might be paying more than that particular employee is costing, but it's an average. But where did we land with that?
The challenge is every grant is a little different. Some will only cover a certain amount. You can do, for certain federal grants, like federal CDBG, they let you charge a fringe amount up to 11% or something like that. We can do that, but here again, we're in the challenge where if we're doing that and we've got 4 positions at $80,000 a piece, I'm making these numbers up, I don't know what they are we definitely charging it? Are we not charging it? What if the revenues come in lower? And then even with that fringe amount, we're sort of whacking a revolving fund for something that maybe we're not getting the revenue in for. Otherwise, we just absorb that cost. That's really 50 one way, 6 one way, half dozen the other way. We can do that with all grants and say, look, let's just pick the amount. But some grants then say, nope, you can't do that. You have to tell us your exact cost. And it's
Okay.
So it's not a bad idea, and we could do that with some of the revolving funds. But here again, this is a revolving fund you're costing a couple of full-time employees to, other than extended day. The rec department doesn't have any full-time benefited employees, so there's the COA one is a very small one. The library one, there's no full-time staff there. So the flexibility in the benefit cost would be, I think, a detriment to doing it as a revolving fund, unless we just do it and throw it all in there. But you're greatly limited in what you can do with a revolving fund. Sometimes I look at the rec revolving fund and I'm like, ooh, I need a police cruiser, but you can't do that.
But Mike, to your point though, I mean, we have the system, we can get the exact numbers. So yes, if they allow us that kind of, whatever the benefit generalization is, we can do it that way. But this, Sean and I are going back and forth on a couple of other accounts. We have the employees, so we know exactly what the cost is. So we'll try to do something in mid-year, and then we can do something in July as a catch-up for June.
Okay.
So I heard a suggestion that the state may do something overall regarding this topic. I'm wondering, should we wait until they do or don't, or?
I wouldn't wait on the
I don't,
legislature.
I don't think
I didn't know.
anything's imminent, it's just
Yes.
legislative advocacy. So it's
Discussed,
school
okay.
committees and school districts want the state to change the mechanism, but that could take, it takes advocacy, then it's gonna take somebody getting a bill up there and everything, so. I don't think it's, I think.
It's getting a little more traction,
It's
but
getting
it's not,
traction.
there's no set line for that.
Yeah. It's not quite at the stage where somebody's proposed a bill and it's gonna get voted on yet, it's just in the advocacy stage.
And there's nothing that says we would have to do it this year versus next year versus the year after, right? We could make this change.
We can have this argument every year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The next 50 years.
We could do a warrant for one more year and then have the same discussion next year, I mean.
Okay.
So what were we hoping to get out of today's meeting? I mean, I feel like were you hoping to just kind of get a general sentiment and then we come up with a specific proposal and we say like, yes, this is what we think should go to town meeting? Or like, what are we?
My hope was that we do not put a warrant article on there, and we resolve it some other way, but.
When's
don't-
the deadline for warrants? Would it be before BBC meets again, or when?
No, we have till sometime in March. I don't have the exact calendar, but
17th, I thought. March 17th?
that sounds close.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull up the calendar.
Evacuation day.
So we'd need a decision.
I would
Within the next
anticipate this would
month.
be a lengthy discussion at town meeting as to why, how, what, and where as well.
Yeah, I think if you
And
can
remember,
decide.
we always put placeholders on the warrant and then just withdraw them. So I don't want anyone to think that that's an artificial deadline that we must have made a decision necessarily by then.
Okay.
We throw a warrant, a placeholder on there to make sure we have it, and then
Okay.
we pull it.
That makes sense. So we could put a warrant on and we could pull it if we don't need
Yeah.
it. Okay.
I mean, given that it was presented last town meeting as a one-time, and given that there's a lot of discussion about how a revolving fund would work, my personal preference would be put it in the budget. And we can always reconsider that in the future year, but at the moment, that seems sort of like the default way to handle it.
Seems like the cleanest.
Cleanest, yes.
And again,
I really don't, school committee is gonna agree with that. Go ahead.
I don't know, I mean, last year, we told town meeting that we would do this one-time cash so we could build the revenue to continue to support it. It seems like it's right to actually have a conversation about the revolving account now that the revenue is coming in. We're setting up a revolving account to continue the funding that you supported last year, you know?
the only caveat to that is that the revenue is from last year, so it's not for the 26 budget, so we anticipate, and Sean and I have talked on this a lot, we anticipate that number to be in the 500 to 600 range, but it's not there yet. So in practicality, what we said is we don't have the actual results.
Correct.
We anticipate it to be fine.
We started going full force more so in like November to start billing more, or December. Like that's really when we got it kicked off. We got people trained and all those things to actually do their billing. So we can make a pretty strong assumption
Yeah.
that it will get up to that point in a full year of revenue.
Yeah. Again, I would think we put it in the budget this year, we work towards, I think we can all agree that, okay, maybe the revolving fund is something we look at and then present it for next year, because then we'll have a good number. That 300 did turn into $650,000 in total revenue. I think we're all in agreement that it's just the messaging, really. If you put it in your budget, we're increasing the revenue, so that's the message.
Yep.
We have 300,000, we're increasing by 300,000 because we know we're gonna get that revenue. It's not peeled off, we don't peel off ambulance receipts, we don't peel off other stuff, so it's,
Just a debit and a credit.
yeah.
Yeah, simple.
Well, we definitely need
You
to
should,
report on it
but-
to town meeting of where we stand.
Probably pay for 6 more ambulances 6 times over with the amount of trips they're taking.
Or 1.5 now with inflation.
Yeah. Can we just, in the future, just make sure we're clear that it's Medicaid, not Medicare, what's
Yeah.
on the slide? 'Cause
Yeah.
Medicare is for the elderly, so,
Right.
or over
Let's build them
65.
too.
You know,
This funding will serve as a one-year bridge while the school department takes steps to increase future Mass Health Medicaid funding by adding new claiming categories such as speech and language, OT, PT, BCBA. Funding will support one service provider and 2 positions previously funded in the school operating budget. So we weren't clear, at least in the yellow sheet, what our
Right.
plan was. We just talked about increasing claims.
Well, and certainly the schools by May will be able to speak to that at town meeting and say like, all right, from, looking at the first 3 quarters, this is what our numbers are looking like.
Yep.
Yeah, we should definitely say that, and then at that point, it might be appropriate to say, and we're thinking about a revolving fund that might be,
There's nothing wrong with a second year of just, let's do it this way for you. 1 year looked good, are we kicking the can down the road? Yeah, but let's give it 1 more year.
You mean do another warrant?
no.
No.
Put it in the budget, but look for a long-term.
No, actually, I was saying do another warrant.
He was saying do it.
I mean,
He was saying we
it's-
did it once, it wouldn't hurt to do it
If
again.
everyone says we're doing this against it, yep, this worked last year, the revenue came in, the expenses matched, we'd like 1 more year to decide, does it really make sense for a revolving fund? Does it not make sense? I'd like to see a benefit analysis if we're costing the position, if we cost all those benefits and all the other happy horse stuff that goes along with it, are we still there? Because, again, just the concern that when you factor all that in, even if you use a pro forma, you can almost squeeze another position out of the dollar amount, and then we don't have to worry about those smaller fluctuations. We're paying on the other side by, the health insurance budget, but if it's, look at this, we accept the cost of the benefits, you get $300,000 a year, that's 5 positions or whatever it is. If we start adding the benefits, are you squeezing it down 4? For once, I'm in favor of you having more flexibility in your budget. One and only time in 10 years.
No, I agree with Tony on this. I think that it makes sense to have, keep it as separate from the regular budget, because we went to the trouble of splitting it out. And so to dump it back in and then think we maybe are gonna labor split it back out, I think that's just gonna confuse the story, right? But I think that it's pretty easy to say like, okay, looking back, some of our free cash can be attributed to the fact that the FY25 actual revenues exceeded our budgeted amount. And so we're gonna take some of that free cash and apply it to this specific position, which is sort of like what would have happened if it had been a revolving fund, but we're not, it's kind of like manually doing the revolving fund at town meeting.
Which for a couple of years makes sense to do until we're certain that we make, the numbers are there.
I mean, we can certainly draft the warrant and then that'll allow it to be a discussion again, so it'll be familiar at town meeting and then set the stage for like the future expectations for,
Yeah.
the next year.
And then we should definitely mention the possibility of a revolving fund in the yellow sheets, so that we're kind of,
Right.
So we want a couple of years of numbers to make sure it's
More specific.
we had the same discussion Tuesday night about snow and ice. We know we're gonna go over snow and ice this year, and the board asked, well, so we're gonna increase snow and ice, and it's like, well, wait a minute, we're up 1 year.
Right.
The last 5 we barely went over, so give us a second year. I mean, we can deficit spend on snow and ice, we did it for years, most towns do. Let's give it a second year and see where we are, and then if next year's winter is the same as this year and we're $400,000 over, I'm making that number up, then we might say, okay, 2 years in a row now being $400,000 over, we know we need to start making an adjustment. If next year we end up having a winter like we've had the last 5 years, maybe we say, okay, it was a blip and we don't need to go up. Same thing with this, let's give it another year or two, make sure that the billings come up, see where the numbers are, do the benefit analysis. There's nothing wrong with moving things slowly because we're getting the positions, we're providing the services, the revenue's coming in. We can take a little bit of time to figure out the right mechanism.
The next
Before we
two,
jump off, I think my only concern about this, and I'll just say this last piece, is that, where are the guarantees, right? Like that when something, if, things start to go, that overall the budget starts to go crap and we're still keeping up our end of the bargain, and we're $600,000 over, whatever it is. And it's like, well, but the school budget is being reduced by X, Y, or Z, and now we've, it's an important enough set of positions for a vulnerable population in our schools that seeing it protected, the only thing I'm really worried about that.
I don't think town meeting would say no. I mean, you can never predict town meeting, but I think this is the mechanism to do this. This resulted in a net reduction of positions on the budget, and we'd like to continue doing it. And once we have a couple of years of the data, we might come up with a revolving fund, or maybe we work it into the budget. But you could play sort of both arguments there. If somebody says, and I agree with you putting it in the budget, we'll just put it in the budget. Well, then it's tracking is difficult and this and that. This is working. Let's get a couple of years. Then when we know it's set, we'll pick a final solution,
I think you also have
final
the,
resolution.
yeah, you have the strength of just saying that this isn't, this is a policy decision, temporary or interim one that is supported by all three boards and through the BBC. So I think that takes a little bit of pressure off the schools in that it is something that, from a general government and FinCom perspective, would be supported as well.
That's helpful. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not totally opposed to the step-by-step plan to get us to the revolving account. I would kind of be a revolving account first, warrant second, and then operating third. So I think this is a decent middle ground just to get us to that point.
The next two slides are just kind of quick after, last night, and FinCom has asked us, just potential if we were to not use any free cash. Again, just, these are two scenarios I came up with, just more for reference, what cuts would look like. Number one is just a pro rata, so we have to cut 6.2% out of the budget. Pro rata.
Maybe this one has it. No,
They don't have that in the,
I didn't have it. in
We're
my
already
copy.
cutting the
Oh,
budget.
there we go. Yeah, see?
we had a paper jam right before I was coming down here, so I was like, I'm collating some of the stuff, I'm like, yeah, be kidding me. So scenario one is just, again, pro rata across the departments. Just of note, the shared cost net, I took out of shared cost everything that is a mandatory expense and funding of our stabilization accounts. So debt service,
Yeah.
workers' comp, state assessments, charges, there's no room in those. So this basically left us with Medicare and capital is really what that is.
Yep.
In Medicare, obviously, we reduced positions, that will come down anyways. We'd have to look at reducing the capital expenditures. And then the second one's a little bit more complicated, but it's based on the growth from fiscal 26 to 27, and then applied a growth weighted reduction. And you can see what that does. So a couple of different ways to look at it. Again, we could come up with probably 5 or 6 other scenarios, but it's just showing what the impact would be. And obviously with those numbers, public safety, we've already talked about the need for additional staffing, but now we're looking at cutting $2 million from that. So I think Tony can talk more of it, but it would be significant service cuts across various entities and various departments.
It's important to present this, but I think we need, in addition to the dollar number, what does that actually mean? So if you take $2 million out of public safety, I guess it's, how many firefighters, how many police officers does that equal? If
So-
you take it out of education, what does that mean? So
Right.
forth.
Like you did in September with the scenarios that were presented, I think that was a 10% across the board that we were talking about. We would just take that kind of analysis and apply it to this reduction.
Yeah, we used 10% a little bit earlier only because that ends up being sort of the effective number you're reducing, just because there's certain items you just can't reduce. And, facilities, we're saying we cut $584,000. You might be able to skate through 1 year by dropping all your maintenance lines, but an elementary school has a day custodian and a night custodian. How do you need both. You can't really do anything there. So we can continue to put that out, but roughly assume every $100,000 is a body, if you will. So when you look at that number, assume that's how many people you're going to lose generally. Because again, our operating budgets, as you know, are not, they're not significant. They're not a significant portion of the budget. They're not a cost driver. And we could cut 10 cops or 10 firefighters and the fuel line's probably not going to go anywhere. The vehicle maintenance line's probably not going to go anywhere. Our utilities costs and the facilities budget aren't going to go anywhere because we have less people working out of the building, which means that you're really probably looking at like a 10% salary budget reduction.
Yeah, I just think you need to have that qualitative description to go on the quantitative thing, because, some people, $2 million means something, other people's like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I think
to
that,
say,
right.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
You can say, that we're cutting our fuel budget by 10%, but it doesn't have as much meaning as to say what is the impact on public safety staffing, educational staffing, all these other services that we have.
We can add like a little, maybe even a line in here that just briefly talks about what it means. And I know everyone always says, oh, it's just scare tactics, but our costs are in the bodies. We don't spend money on things that aren't people.
Yeah, well, a $0.8 million reduction in, it's gonna cost.
It's gonna have an effect, yeah.
Absolutely.
Just need to say
Yeah, I
what
mean,
it is.
It's, you're right, there's no denying that.
Yeah. Even if we stop heating all our buildings, we're still not gonna hit $7.8 million,
Exactly.
and that's gonna cause all sorts of other problems.
Well, Tony has a plan not to heat them in July and August, so we've already attained that.
We cut the July heat budget, come on, guys.
But I thank you, Jeff, for putting this together. I do think it's important for everyone to be aware of, like, what does it look like if there's no free cash that supplements the budget? Like, that's an important baseline piece of information for everybody to be aware of.
And I think the message to town meeting last year was, we're using a significant amount of free cash. If we continue to do that year after year, and particularly if that amount that we need to balance the budget goes up year over year, it's unsustainable.
Yes.
So I think what we're seeing here is that we're at a stable level of we're using free cash, but it's a stable level. And we're still able to, and we have that ability even after using free cash for our one-time stuff of, we supplemented some reserve accounts, we've spent it on capital, which is what we're supposed to be doing. We still have some free cash available that we can use to basically stabilize the budget. But, so the concern is somewhat less, at least in the near term, but you still have the concern long-term of, well, what happens if something happens? Like, what happens if inflation goes up? What happens if state aid goes down?
Well, and
Those are the things that are
historically,
problems.
we haven't always hit $7.8 million of free cash. I mean, the last year and the year before were really strong free cash numbers. I mean, although this year's free cash number seems stronger than it really was because we hadn't yet finished spending the previous
We
year's.
carried over.
We carried over, right?
It's still a big drop. Like, it's a good number, but it was, you know, we did what, from 25 to 18 or 19? I mean, it was a significant drop, and I would expect next year probably the same thing. Best case scenario, we hold our own. Building permits are still strong, but, you know.
Right. So, and we we don't want to be in a position where if we get $7.8 million in free cash, it all has to be committed to the operating budget, and there's no room to cover an overage in snow and ice, or to pay for capital items, or,
Right.
Right.
that's not the position we want to be in. I agree, it's better than a position where free cash keeps going, the hole in the budget gets bigger every year.
Yes.
But
Right.
still having a hole this size is a lot to
Yeah.
overcome.
We're not out of the hole, but it's we've perhaps pushed it off a little bit.
We didn't dig it any deeper this year.
Didn't dig it any deeper. so
Pushing
the-
off is the right word.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
problem is not necessarily this year, it's maybe 2 years from now, but the problem is still there.
So I think you guys actually very nicely segued into the next part of the agenda, which just kind of naturally flowed like that. It was great. Actually, maybe Jeff put his slides together like that. But there was an agenda item for the BBC to officially vote on a position for the free cash use. It came up in some of our discussions that this was something discussed in finance meetings with the town and the schools. And so just making sure that BBC as a whole, there is a consensus coming out of BBC what our position is on the use of free cash to balance the budget this year.
So I think what we're asked to do is just to vote to endorse or oppose the use of free cash, but at this point, we're not really on a specific number for free cash, because that may
Correct,
fluctuate.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
This was definitely just an official, are we telling our town partners, or we're telling our finance partners to, yes, move forward with using free cash to balance the budget. Obviously, not a number, not all of it, none of it, just a position from BBC so that they can move forward with building the budget and how to fund it.
I think the information presented is pretty reasonable. It's very supportive of the notion of using free cash. So I will make a motion to endorse the use of free cash to balance the FY27 budget.
I'm a little uncomfortable with being open-ended like that. Could we modify your proposal to say in an amount not to exceed the amount we used last year?
Well, currently the projection is 7.7. What was last year's?
0.45.
450.
if I could, do we want to wait until we have the health insurance number, even if we do just a quick
Yeah.
remote? And my only fear is could be $1 million swing.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about, state aid might go up or down 20 or 30 grand. It could very well be $1 million swing. I like where you're going, but I don't want us to be in a position where we find out that it's the full 11% and our plans are the worst and it's actually 14%. And as a result, we've got to come up with another $1.2 million or another $1.2 million in reductions. If we had that number, I'd say we move forward. I'm just wondering if we wait and we could do a very quick remote meeting next week if anyone wants to meet on the vacation week. I know I was off, but I can jump on a call. I just would feel better knowing that number, but
I would actually feel more comfortable with that, so.
Yeah,
I'll withdraw the motion,
thank you, Bill.
I'd like to,
but go ahead.
I was hoping to speak a little bit more to the motion. I think what Tony was reacting to was the trying to put a cap on the number, right? But I think
no, real quick, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. We don't know where
it's
we are.
premature. I understand.
And what if health insurance goes up at 6% and we get to use 7.4 and I can go hire people and spend extra money? I mean,
Well, no, we're definitely,
I
I don't think
for that too, right? We're still gonna have to, but we're still gonna have to discuss the actual numbers. This isn't the end all be all. I just know this came up in conversations that, there was not confusion, but just like wanting a confirmation that, we are okay with using the free cash, or if we're gonna say we're gonna vote and that, 5-1, absolutely not. So, that's really all this was to put that on the docket, to have a discussion and a vote on that, so we have a position.
I think that in the end, I'm going to want to endorse some use of free cash to fund the budget. I'm not in favor of trying to slash the budget as drastically as this says. However, I'm very mindful of the fact that we have a financial policy that says that free cash should not be used for the operating budget. It's supposed to be used for one-time expenses. And as a FinCom member, to say we are recommending bringing a budget to town meeting that is in direct violation of our agreed upon financial policies is a weird position to be in. I feel like part of our responsibility as FinCom is to make reasonable decisions, but it's also to be mindful of our policies and address those. I think that it's important for people to understand how much we can afford out of our ongoing recurring revenues and how much we are supplementing with one-time monies. And I think that when we here decide let's just throw $7.8 million in and bring the whole thing as a package to town meeting, I think town meeting members kind of miss out on some of that understanding and also kind of feel like they don't really have a choice. All they can do is vote up or down, and there's no room to have debate and discussion about what level of one-time support is appropriate. And so one thing that I had suggested last year, and I am curious what people's thoughts are, is what if everybody put together a budget that was a main budget that was actually supported by recurring revenues, and then put together a supplemental budget that would be funded by free cash, so that people could see what that looks like, and that then each department could make the argument for why this is necessary and why spending free cash at this time makes sense. I think that FinCom would definitely be in support of many supplemental budgets, or maybe one. I don't know exactly how it would be structured, but I just think that I'm not sure how we handle this fact that we have this giant hole in this budget and we know that it's there, and so I'm curious what other people think.
So what your suggestion would be, what we have before us are these scenarios about a target reduction of 7.8, for example, on slide 8. So your supplemental budget would be something along this line, but with the specifics in terms of what the department heads would do to meet that 6.2% reduction, so to speak, or whatever the reduction is.
Yeah, and I don't know how the numbers would exactly play out, but.
I think we can present that. What I wouldn't want to do is have town meeting trying to decide which department gets free cash and which department doesn't. I don't know that that's a good discussion to have, to say, well, the library certainly deserves free cash because they get permit revenue, whatever it happens to be, but the school department doesn't deserve any free cash. It's not about a department deserving or having better free cash. I think if we want to present, here's what we need to offset to provide a level services budget. If we don't do that, here's what you're looking at in the reductions. We can expand on that. I don't know if it's this department gets free cash, this department doesn't get free cash. Then you get an argument about who generates it. So take the building department, right? They cover their costs and then they generate a lot of free cash. So we're gonna lay staff off in the building department that generates the free cash, but not in the police department, or vice versa. I don't think that argument about we're either offsetting the budget with reserves or we're not. We can make a decision about our spending priorities. So if we're saying, let's offset the budget reserves to, buy Tim a Cadillac, okay, that's not a good offset of reserves, but if it's to get to a level service, I don't think we should split departments in cost functions, because even to that point, we can't do anything with health
That's kind of what town
insurance.
meeting votes on, though. Every year, they vote on budget by budget. They are appropriating money not as a whole, but as they approve the general government budget, they approve the public safety budget, they approve the infrastructure budget. Why wouldn't you want to show, all right, this is, and make those arguments to say, look, you might think the building department budget is high, but honestly, there's a lot of revenue that's associated with this.
I think we can get there. I think we need to show what the cost of reductions are without making it seem like, well, what does the building department get for free cash versus what does another department? It's not about what they get for free cash or whether they're worth it with the reserves. It's if we don't balance our budget, these are the reductions we're looking at across the board. And if people chose not to make 2 or 3 of them, that just expands on everything else. So if everyone said, infrastructure, we're not cutting anything there, okay, that $600,000 that they would be short is getting made up somewhere else.
Except I
We're
think you
also
want to let
just
town
being
meeting
on
make
the school
those
side.
decisions, right? It's not that.
Not about where to allocate the free cash. I don't.
Town meeting it's not appropriate for town meeting to decide where to appropriate money to which budget? That's exactly their role.
When you're talking about free cash, I think it's different to start breaking up our budgets by free cash. I don't think that's a good practice.
So it would be, okay, the infrastructure, so infrastructure would put together a budget for $9.6 million. That would be presented as part of the general budget. And then they would put together a supplemental budget for $637,000 and say, we really think it's important to have this extra, and these are why, and does town meeting approve?
We can get there, I just think we need to do it differently.
Okay, I'm open to that.
So we have a motion at town meeting for each budget section, and that motion says where the money is coming from, right?
Correct. What we did last year is the free cash was spread out through a number of budgets. I don't think we should do that. I think we should allocate it somewhere differently. To that point of giving town meeting that discussion, allocate it to the shared costs or the fixed costs, and then if town meeting says, no, we're not doing anything, we have to go back and make reductions. But, what is it, general government category 1 is $400,000, but public safety is $200,000, because then you're somewhat making up about how much free cash they need, unless you're going to try to say, well, this is what they would have to reduce, so that's how much free cash they need. But I don't think we want to split departments based on which one gets free cash. It's
Right. But I'm saying, where did we put it in the motions? I don't remember.
it was spread out between most of them.
Yes, we based it on the weighted average. Because again, that's the
So each
DOR
motion said raised from
recommended, you
taxes
have to
X
put it
number
in
of
there
dollars.
somewhere, yeah.
Raised from free cash, this number of dollars.
Yeah, we had indirect, we had raise and appropriate, and then we had free cash.
Right. So I guess, at least part of the presentation needs to be, at minimum, needs to be, here's how much free cash we're using, here's how we're putting it in the motions, and if we don't approve it, here's what the impact would be.
Correct, but I think we should contain the free cash to a single motion, and then we'd have to make changes if we didn't get there. Because then you're getting into a weird, well, we think this department gets free cash versus not. I think you're gonna have a more complicated discussion than is worth it. And last year it came up, for instance, people said, well, we think we're using too much free cash, so we want to cut general government, we want to cut the clerk's office. It's was that what you want to cut? Well, no, I have a problem with public safety, and we're only allocating $200,000 there. I think we want to keep the expense budget here, and if we're going to use free cash, why wouldn't it be health insurance or something like that? Not that we can necessarily cut that. I just think we got to be careful about how we do it and present it. We don't want to overcomplicate it or overconfuse it.
Right, but we do want to make it
Because really what we should be doing is raising it to offset the tax rate, and that's a separate article where it comes up. We're raising it as a revenue, but there's different ways you can do it.
and maybe that's what we need to do. I think it should be explicit that everyone understands we're using this amount of free cash, which is one-time money, and it's paying for X. Because if you didn't do it, this would be the type impact.
I think we can make that clear. I think you take a sheet like this and expand on it and show what that means.
Right. And maybe there needs to be a separate
But,
motion to just say appropriate the free cash. Go ahead.
Sorry, I want to kind of, just because like I know we're already past 2 and I know people are getting close and Teresa has her hand up. But I just want to say from the school side too, that it sounds dangerously like getting close to line item veto for people in town meeting for the schools, because if we're going to have to put out 2 budgets, that's like, you approve a budget or you don't when it comes to the school side. So that sounds dangerously like giving town meeting the ability to cut out specific programs for us because we had to put it in a supplemental budget. Yeah, that makes me very uncomfortable, but Teresa?
Yeah, thanks. I have a lot of thoughts and I'll try to bring it together, but Maya, in terms of this is a very important activity, I agree with you. And there's a part of my brain that desperately wants to dive in and do this. And also, having lived through all the budget work that the schools in the town did 2017, 18, and 19, right? Like, essentially what we did then. We had 2 budgets. And we had the budget, they both went to town meeting, right? It was like, this is the budget if the override doesn't pass. This is the budget if the override does pass. I know this is a little bit of a scenario because there's not going to be an override ballot going to the town meeting. But I do 100% support the idea behind it. I 100% support the town meeting and our whole community needs to know. And they deserve to know more than I personally think they've been getting at some town meetings in the past. And I have heard from a lot of town meeting members who are asking these questions. And I've heard from a lot of town meeting members who have been very pro-school and very pro-town and have helped us with operational override and the middle school override, who are having a lot of doubt. And to know that people who were fully supportive are now in doubt and have questions is something that all of us in this meeting should take seriously and consider. I hear Anne Marie's point, I share that as well. It does, the school site get a little dicey and that scares me a little bit. I also worry a little bit about the timing because school break is next week and we already have a lot on our plates in March. So if this was something we were gonna need to add in March, not saying that we couldn't, but I would need to know from Sean and Tim that they felt like they had the bandwidth to do that. But I do think that the big thing, we have to tell a very strong story and we have to be very transparent, all this together, about if we did not use free cash, what would that look like? I mean, those numbers that Jeff shared, right, on the school side, we're looking at like 63 million, a reduction, sorry, of 4 million or a reduction of 3.3 million. That's a lot of money. And I think that's more than we had to look at for the overhead, right? Because we weren't that high up at a reduction. So I just know what the big buckets of what that could mean, and people in the community need to understand.
So,
Sorry, I'm going around my thoughts.
just as an aside, my FY '27 preliminary budget memo did just this. I didn't create 2 budgets, but I did create what it would look like if we had to make significant cuts. And there are $3.5 million worth of cuts in there, right? They're all devastating. That number, I mean, it's general numbers, it's not exact, right? I
Yeah.
don't think I support necessarily 2 budgets. I support, what it would look like if we didn't have X, Y, and Z, and we have that. And that data is already there, it's public, anybody can go to our agendas and see that, open that up and see exactly what that would look like. I will always say that, we're not quite at override time for. And I am awfully nervous if we start doing this, that we're gonna start losing good staff. And that is a huge concern of mine if we focus or not. I just want folks to know.
I think it's important for us to, I am flexible about like how we actually convey this information, but I do think it's important for us to kind of think this through, and I don't think, I appreciate Jeff providing these numbers this way, but I don't think that the way to do this would be pro rata straight cuts, right? I think there are, FinCom likes to talk about there's the need to haves and the nice to haves. And not all of these departments are the same. And, so like if we needed to make a giant cut, on the schools, they've kind of made some lists. If we had to make a giant cut on the general government side,
Which we have shown
what it would
before.
look like.
We did it last year in the fall, we did it in the spring, we did it in the fall. I think using these as again, I don't think we should do two budgets. Showing the impact of cuts is important. We need a number to go with what those cuts would be, because that's different than the budget you're actually going to make. I think it's a good starting point. If you pick one or the other, say roughly if we use no free cash, this is what we're looking at. This is not a second budget, but these are the things you can expect to lose. At the end of the day, it might be position A versus position B, but you need a starting point. We're not building a second budget.
Yeah, no, but you can say, like I was saying, you need a qualitative description of what is $2 million about safety. I mean, that's,
We
okay,
can do
that's
that.
20
We've
police
done that
officers.
to different degrees the last.
Yeah,
couple
that's the
months,
kind of
last
things
few years.
I was suggesting.
And that can be part of that presentation at town meeting, that, here's how we're balancing the budget. Well, what if we didn't use any free cash to balance the budget? Here's what you would be looking at.
I absolutely agree with that. I just, I think doing a supplemental is just, that freaks me out from, from the two perspectives, like, from being able to basically veto certain specific things from the schools. And just like you've got people pro schools, pro town, and you're gonna, who shows up to town meeting night and decides that we don't get our supplemental budget because you're not doing a good enough job. And I'm like, great.
At the end of the day, once the school committee budget is approved by town meeting, the school committee has the authority to move that however they wish.
Oh, absolutely.
So it
Yeah.
might exactly be that, so it just sets up a pretty bad precedent there, I think, too. And I wanna have these things with the town where it's like, all right, so guys, I'm saying no more school buses, right? Or I'm saying no, everybody's paying for athletics, and have everybody come out and say, yep, we're gonna support the schools, and they go to the police department too. So that sets up this kind of ickiness, I guess, so to speak, that I don't love.
And it's just to your point, and I know the FinCom, we've talked about it. There are must-haves and nice-to-haves. I understand that, but I think what we've presented in the budget is what the town probably expects, these services. So if you're talking recreation, senior center, library, whatever you may be talking about, it's hard to call those out and then say, okay, well, we can only limit 500 in police, but we're gonna eliminate those departments as a whole. It's hard to do that, but.
Oh, of course it's hard to do that, but I think that when you're $7.8 million in the hole, we maybe need to have some tough conversations about what do we want. And I would absolutely advocate that we spend more money, because I think that a lot of the nice to haves are things that make Norwood and community that we want to live in, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, but I just think, like, as a FinCom, I feel like it's our role to say, like, what budget would we recommend that would actually comply with our financial policies? It would be ugly.
It is important to note, when that policy was written, we were in a different situation financially. Free cash was in a different situation financially, and we were never in a position before to balance our budget with reserves. To a certain extent, we have to remember, any organization, if you have reserves, your priority is the services that you provide, not our financial policies. We don't want to dig ourselves into a deeper hole. We don't want to make things worse, but we have to provide services to the community. That's what we're here to do, and we have taxpayer money to do that, so we have to keep that in mind. We don't want to just roll the dice and let that number get jacked up every year, and then one year we have nothing and everyone goes away and the town gets screwed. But it's not the end of the world that we use reserves to push ourselves through when we have those reserves. They were extra revenue generated. It goes back to the taxpayers to provide them the services. I don't see a world where we have the revenue and we cut the services to the taxpayer while just holding on to their money. I think that's important. I did a presentation for the selectmen last April and again in September, outlining significant reductions if we do lose free cash. Has everyone seen those?
No.
I will make sure everyone gets copies of whatever format I have them in, because we have, I get that maybe the FinCom hasn't seen it, maybe the schools haven't done it, but I've done it twice for the board in a year. If we're looking at a big cut, here's the number of positions you're looking at and what we would end up losing. So I will make sure that gets out to everyone. I think not a supplemental budget, but an explanation at town meeting of here's what we would be looking at. It's not always all or nothing, but reasonably, the school budget, my understanding from Tim, is a level services budget. There's nothing in there that wasn't there the year before. The general government budget is level services or less than level services, because we cut a couple bodies out through attrition. So what's going forward is level services all across the board.
I think what you describe, I think, is a really good exercise in many ways, because that's exactly what we need to do if we were in a position where a 2.5 override would fail. And to that point, certainly, if that would be the case, for general government, we would focus on not across the board cuts, so to speak. We had to be a little more judicious about, well, do we really want to cut $2 million out of public safety or find those cuts elsewhere? I think for this particular town meeting, if you guys make a presentation, I think for general government and schools make a presentation, maybe it's an opportunity to present that kind of detail during those presentations. That's sort of the what-if scenarios if we don't do that. Has some benefit. I know it's a little more time-consuming, but I think that might be a beneficial thing to give to town meeting members in terms of this is what we'd be considering if we were not to be balancing the budget with our free cash this year. I don't like to do it, but the reality is that's what we're looking at. So I think from a communication standpoint, I think that has a lot of merit.
All right. Did we agree we're going to have a call next week? Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Tim, I took a quick look and I just really quickly added up, so my number is not exactly, but in the FY27 preliminary budget, where Tim did list like a tier 2 budget with possible reductions if the school committee needs to discuss, we're just under $3 million. And I can send that memo out. I mean, it's on our website, but I can send it out so you can all see. It's a lot of similar topics we talked about if the override weren't going to pass. It's things that I don't think any of us would want to happen. It would have severe impact on our students in many, many ways. I do think people need to understand, but also I would just want to make sure if we do go this path of presenting at town meeting of, which I'm supportive of what it would mean for no free cash, the school committee would just need to talk about that a little bit more and approve it, because we wouldn't want to say something as a potential. We don't want to be perceived as scare tactics, right? Like none of us want to do that. Second thing I'll say, and I've said this in a lot of public meetings, and I know most of you probably roll your eyes when I say it, but all 3 boards desperately need to get together in one room and talk about the financial policies, because I completely understand where the Finance Commission is coming from. It's been a very long time since we've done that, and very few of us were elected officials at the time that those policies were voted on, and I think they need to be looked at and voted on again, because there's a lot of conversation happening that if we were all on the same page, would be happening in a more productive way.
Just to be clear, $3.478 million.
With regard to,
So we did not take a vote on the free cash. We had a very productive discussion about it. I think it's pretty clear that the budget has been built with that assumption that that's how we're going to end up having to fund our budgets. How we actually get to that is something for future meetings, for sure. I never intended that conversation to be an end-all be-all to how much we would spend. But like I said, there was a request to make sure that, moving forward, that this was what BBC was even looking for. Okay, so we're already a little bit over what we expected to be. I think I budgeted an hour and a half, gotta tell you. That's what my calendar blocked off for. Figuring it would go over this time. But we do need to set up some time for a future, for future meetings. What do you think, when do we want to meet next? I think we obviously need to meet a little bit more often than once a month as we're getting down into the nitty-gritty.
When are we going to get the GIC number?
We should know tomorrow, unless they play some game. So, end of the week, early next week, we will actually know just where we are. And again, it's such a big swing. I'm nervous making a decision until we know the swing. I kind of like where Eric was going, but again, we might find out that it's $6.5 million.
Are you thinking next week or the week after, Tony?
I mean, could we do a quick meeting next week once we know?
Next Wednesday?
That might be tough on the
Yeah,
school side.
I'm out of here. I'm out
I
next
think
week.
that maybe
We can
early.
do a remote meeting.
2 weeks?
Key West does not have phone
2
service.
weeks?
I think they have.
We can meet there.
Yeah, shit, if we're $8 million in the hole, why not, right?
Possibly.
Let's
the
do
week-
it all.
I prefer Tuesday or Wednesday.
Or
And we
possibly.
can always change the time too, if it's better for people to do a remote meeting like in the evening, so no one's on the slopes or something.
Oh, I love it.
Slopes of Key West.
I'll find them if they have them, Bob.
Don't know when. Goodbye.
I don't know. What what are we thinking? We thinking next Wednesday, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
Not hearing any objection. I could also do 1. I'm seeing shaking head. Tim says yes. Bruce says yes. Jeff, that was are you a holdout for that?
For next week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it if you can. The one thing I think we'll look at is what is the final free cash number, assuming we have our GIC numbers. And if for some reason we don't, we'll let everyone know, we'll cancel it, and we'll just work on rescheduling
Yeah.
it. But
That's all.
we know the number is 7.7 million. Let's get the GIC number and see where that number actually is, and that might make us feel better or worse, depending on where it goes.
All right, so the 18th at 1, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And how much free cash does the town have coming out of fall?
About 15 million, but we'll have expenses in the spring, and we gotta carry some of that forward. But if you look at the total budget excluding light, we're offsetting with what, 5% is offset by reserves? It's not the end of the world, if my math is right.
All right, so next week, 1 o'clock on Wednesday, fully remote, and just one agenda item to, well, 2 technically, if we have minutes by then. I don't know if Melanie's going to pull them together by then, but minutes and then just to look at the GIC numbers. That sound fabulous?
Yes.
Great. Anything else? Sorry? Oh, I thought I heard somebody speaking. So if there's nothing else, is there a?
You were, sorry, just, did you say you were gonna email us the numbers? Because I was taking notes, but I'd like to have the exact numbers before we go to school committee tonight. So could you email us the information you shared in person?
I will, yeah, I'll make that one correction, then I'll send it out.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Is that moved by Eric and seconded by Bob?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I'll just poll because we're remote. So Eric,
Yes?
Maya,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Teresa.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so 6-0. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye, everyone.